And it all starts with the structure of a good story. And if you were to ask my 11-year-old son, what's the structure of a good story, he'll say, oh, I know that. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? Okay. Well, and he's right, there are, but that's probably not very helpful. Now, if you were to ask a Hollywood scriptwriter, what's the structure of a good story, he'll tell you, 6 parts of it. There's a setup, the catalyst, the first turning point, the climax, final confrontation, and resolution. And they'll all tell you the same thing. They all follow this format. And it works really well, okay, for a Hollywood story where you need people to be engaged for 2 hours in a movie and all the ups and downs and turns. Maybe a little bit more than you need for business, but if you were to ask a cognitive psychologist, what's the structure of a story, they'll give you an even different answer, and it's more complicated, and I don't even understand it, okay? The point is, there really is no one single best structure for a story. What you need as a business person is a simple one that works, that you can use. So here's the way I would suggest you to remember how to tell a story. If you start any story with these words, once upon a time there was, you'll almost 100% of the time get the structure right. So for example, if you say, once upon a time there was, what's the next thing that has to come out of your mouth? There was, what? What? The main character. It's got to be the next word that comes out. Once upon a time there was a princess, a frog, a little puppet named Geppetto. Something's got to be right. Somebody, right? All right, main character. What do you got to talk about next? What they did. Put them in a situation. So what happened to that main character? And then, what's the last thing that you have to do? What happens at the end of every story? And they lived happily ever after. You tell how the story ended, okay? So basically, my 11-year-old is right. There is a beginning, middle, and an end, okay? But that's not very helpful. I'm going to tell you how to think about that structure, but really, it's the one that you've all been taught for your WDPs. It's using context, action, result. The context is when you introduce the main characters, the action is what goes on, and the result is that end. So that same construct you can use. Now I'm going to tell you what needs to go in each of those, but that basic framework works, and if you get it backwards or get those out of order, it doesn't work nearly as well. So let me go to context. This is where you have to do a few things here. One is you have to say where and when the story happened, okay? Because if you say, once upon a time there was a, puppet, named whatever, Pinocchio, okay, people know, okay, this is a fairy tale or whatever, and they might listen to you because they assume you've got a good point that you're trying to make, but they know what it is. If you say, back in the year 2000, when I was working on the diaper business and I was a finance manager, they know, okay, this is a real story, it really happened to you, and it was in that year. Okay, so they've got that context is important. But you need to answer these 3 questions, okay? Who's the hero? Okay? Who's the story about, the protagonist, if you will? You need to answer, what is it that they're trying to accomplish? What's their objective, their passion, their mission? What are they trying to do in the story? And then lastly, very important, you have to answer the question, who or what is getting in the way? Who's the villain? Who's the bad guy? It could be a person, could be your competitor, it could be the mountain you're trying to climb. There's got to be a villain, an adversary, or there's no story. There's got to be, the hero needs to do battle with something or it's just not interesting, okay? In choosing that hero, you've got a few things to consider. It could be a real person like Jason Zoller. I told you about the jury room table story. Could be your boss or a coworker or something else. Could be a fictional person like this typical Walmart shopper or your target consumer in the business you work in. But the most powerful hero you can ever come up with is you. When you tell a story about you, a real story about your life, something that happened to you. And the reason is because the most important thing that your hero needs to be is relevant to your audience. Okay? It needs to be somebody they can relate to. They can think, oh, yeah, that could be me. I could have been that person. Or that could be me if I did those same things. If your hero is Superman, that's not too helpful because I can't fly and I can't bend steel. So the fact that he saved the planet is interesting and entertaining, but not helpful. Okay? You're in the business world. Your job in storytelling is not just to entertain. Your job is to make a point, to make a recommendation, to change somebody's behavior, to change a decision. You need more than entertainment. Your audience needs to relate to your hero so they can put themselves into that story. Okay? All right, the action. Here's basically where the hero and the villain do battle. Right? You've got to have that action going on for it to be an interesting story. If I were to tell you a story about the bounty business that we launched 40 years ago, and the business has grown 10% a year, and we're the market share leader, and we've never made a bad decision, and everybody that's worked on the business is fabulously wealthy and beautiful. I mean, you know, that's not a very interesting story. What that tells me is you guys got lucky. Like, you never had a decent competitor, you never had your price structure collapse, you never had a manufacturing plant catch on fire. Nothing bad ever happened? Really? Wow. I can't learn anything from that. Nothing. So there's got to be something going on in your story that's interesting for people to learn from. Okay, and then the result. You got to do two things. One is you've got to tell how the story ended, right? They lived happily ever after. But two, you got to reinforce the moral of the story that you wanted your audience to learn. Okay, now if you told the story well, they will have already gotten the moral. It's probably your recommendation, your conclusion anyway, but it's okay to tell them again. You know, tell them, okay, this, if you didn't get it already, this is the moral of the story.